Night settles differently in the desert town of Mariston. It doesn't fall, it crawls. It stretches out from the far mesas like a hungry shadow, swallowing the horizon slowly until every shape trembles in the dark. I arrived there when I was 16, dragged by a storm of circumstances I didn't understand. My aunt, the only person willing to take me in after my mother died, lived in a crooked beige house at the edge of town. Her name was Azaline, a woman with wise eyes and a voice that sounded like it had traveled through centuries. People in Mariston whispered about her, how she was too old to look so young, how she walked the desert at night, how she kept charms made of bones above her door. I didn't want to believe any of it. I only wanted somewhere to belong, somewhere quiet where grief couldn't follow me. But the desert does not leave room for silence. It remembers everything. And on the very first night, as I stood on the porch breathing the dry air, I heard a long, broken cry echo from the far desert like a man calling for help, but with a voice that was not a man's. That I froze, gripping the wooden railing so hard it bit into my palms. The sound came again, closer, trembling, bending itself into something familiar and wrong. It felt human but stretched too thin, like skin pulled over the wrong bones. Azaline stepped beside me without a sound. She carried a lantern carved with sun symbols, its warm glow pushing back the dark just enough for me to see her face. Her jaw was clenched tight. "Don't answer," she whispered. "And whatever you do, don't call its name." My heart was hammered. "Whose name?" I asked. She didn't respond. Instead, she placed a cold charm into my hand, a piece of carved stone shaped like a twisted figure. "If you hear anything like that again, you come inside. You lock the door. And you wait." Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled when she closed them around mine. The desert cry faded, swallowed by the wind, but the unease lingered. I followed her inside, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the sound. But deep inside, I knew I hadn't. Something had watched me from the desert. Something that could borrow voices. Something hungry. Life in Mariston was strange, but not in obvious ways. People avoided the desert after sunset. Doors stayed locked. Windows were salted at the edges. At school, the teachers spoke softly and the students looked tired, their eyes carrying shadows deeper than any sleepless night. That's where I met Kaelren, a boy with a quiet intensity one had never seen before. His hair always looked windswept, and his skin had the faintest scent of sagebrush, as if the desert followed him everywhere. He sat 2 seats behind me in English class, but his presence felt closer, like he was studying every breath I took. One afternoon, as we packed our bags, he said my name in a low voice. "You shouldn't wander at night." I turned, startled. I hadn't told him about the cry I'd heard. Maybe everyone heard things here. "Why?" I asked. He glanced out the window at the endless sand. "Because it can't cross the threshold of a home unless you let it. And it wants to be let in." There was something broken in his eyes, fear mixed with guilt, like he carried a story too heavy for anyone else to hold. And for the first time, I wondered if the desert wasn't just dangerous but personal. That night, I dreamed of footsteps. They circled my bed in slow, deliberate movements, scraping lightly against the wooden floor. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the weight of something bending close, breathing a cold whisper across my neck. When I woke, the charm Azaline gave me was warm, like it had been guarding me. I went outside for air, even though she'd warned me not to wander. The desert moon was full, heavy, and low, bathing everything in silver. And then I saw Kaelren standing alone near the edge of the yard, staring into the darkness. Kaelren's confession stayed with me like a shadow I couldn't shake off. I walked back into the house slowly, each step heavier than the last. Azaline was waiting near the door, as if she already knew something had followed me home. She studied my face for a long moment before speaking. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. I didn't know how to answer. My thoughts spun like dust storms, violent and endless. "I saw Kaelren," I said, but the words came out too thin, too hollow. Azaline's eyes softened in sorrow. And his shadow wasn't his. She wasn't asking. She was stating a truth that hurt her to admit. A skinwalker once walked in this land, she said. It remembers every face it ever stole. I swallowed hard. It wants him, I whispered. Azaline shook her head. It wants anyone who listens. Her voice trembled slightly. That cry you heard on your first night wasn't a mistake. It chooses people who carry pain. They're easier to mimic. I felt something deep inside me tighten. Pain, yes, I carried it like a second heart. Maybe that was why the desert had whispered to me. Maybe that was why the creature had noticed me. The next morning, the sky was a pale, washed-out blue that made the desert look tired. I walked to school trying to force normalcy into my bones. But Mariston didn't know how to be normal. When I reached the courtyard, students were gathered near the tall metal fence, staring at something dark clinging to the wires. As I got closer, I felt the cold hit me first. It wasn't just a chill, it was the same emptiness I'd felt standing beside Kaelren the night before. Hanging on the fence were long scratch marks, deeper than animal claws. A single string of torn cloth flapped weakly in the wind. It looked like it had been ripped from a shirt. Maybe from a boy's shirt. Maybe from Kaelren's. It's getting closer, someone whispered behind me. Their voices shook. I didn't turn to look. I couldn't. There was a faint smell in the air, dirt, old blood, and something worse, something rotten but familiar. A mimicry of human scent. A silence fell across the crowd when Kaelren walked into the courtyard. His eyes were red, his face pale, but he avoided the fence entirely. He didn't need to see it. He already knew exactly what had happened last night. I followed him into the empty hallway, watching the way his shoulders slumped like he was carrying a mountain of secrets. Kaelren, I called quietly. He stopped but didn't turn. His voice was tired. You shouldn't walk near me today. That hurt more than it should have. Did it attack you? He shook his head slowly. It doesn't need to. It waits. It watches. It copies. Every time I lose myself, every time I feel weak, it grows stronger. I stepped closer. I'm not afraid of you. At that, he turned, his expression breaking open. You should be, he said softly. My shadow almost slipped last night. If you hadn't looked away when you did, you might have seen its true form. I swallowed hard. What does it want? He hesitated, then whispered, to be alive again. He lifted his hand and pressed it over his heart. But it can only live by taking someone's place. It almost took mine when I was a child. My mother saved me, but she didn't survive. His voice cracked. It wore her face for weeks before we realized. Horror slid through me like ice. I reached out, gently touching his arm. You're not alone, I said. Not anymore. That afternoon, a storm built across the horizon, dark clouds rolling like bruises over the desert. The wind grew sharp, hissing against the windows. Kaelren and I walked home together, not speaking much. Words. The voice outside the door kept calling, soft at first, then louder, almost desperate. Sweetheart, please open the door, my mother's voice. The exact tone she used on nights when I cried after bad dreams. The way it rose and fell, the tiny tremble near the end of each word, perfect, impossible, cruel. My chest tightened until breathing felt like dragging air through broken glass. Kaelren held my shoulders, his grip steady even as his own hands shook. It isn't her, he repeated, his voice low but firm. It knows your memories. It knows what hurts. Azaline moved quickly around the room, placing charms at every corner like she had practiced this all her life. Do not answer it, she said. Do not speak back. It twists every word. But the voice outside broke again. Please, I'm cold, and something inside me cracked. I stepped toward the door without meaning to, pulled forward by a sound my heart wanted more than anything to believe. Kaelren blocked my path. You can't open it, he said. If you let it in, it will take your place. I knew he was right. I knew my mother was gone. But the sound of her voice made my grief rise like a tide, drowning sense and reason. And the creature knew it. The wind outside howled, shaking the house like fists pounding on wood. Shadows moved under the crack of the door slow, searching shapes that didn't belong to any human. The voice changed, deeper now, more strained. "Let me see you, let me hold you." Azaline placed a hand over my heart. "It is trying to open a place inside you," she whispered. "A door made of longing." Her words made me tremble. Grief was dangerous here. It was a weakness, a doorway, an invitation. And I had carried grief like a scar that never healed. Kaelren stepped away from me, pacing like he was wrestling something inside himself. "It's getting stronger," he muttered. "Too strong." I looked at him closely. His shadow twitched, bending slightly out of sync with his movement. "Kaelren," I whispered, "it's affecting you too." He nodded, jaw tight. "It always does. It knows I'm the one thing standing between it and you." I didn't understand. "Why me?" His voice cracked. "Because you heard it before anyone warned you. Because it tasted of your sorrow the moment you stepped into this town." I swallowed hard. Outside, the thing scraped along the door again, its nails dragging like broken branches. And this time it whispered my name slowly, hungry, claiming it. Azaline lit a handful of dried herbs and threw them into the burning bowl. The smoke rose thicker, swirling with a strange green glow. "Sit," she commanded. We obeyed. She placed a charm in my palm and a different one in Kaelren's. His was shaped like a small claw, mine looked like a closed eye. "If you drop it," she said, "it will know." I held the charm so tightly the edges dug into my skin. The house groaned as if something heavy leaned against it. "It's testing the walls," Kaelren murmured, looking for a weakness. His eyes darted to the window. I followed his gaze and my breath caught. A figure stood outside, pressed against the glass. Its face was fogged by the storm, but I saw enough. Hollow cheeks, wide glassy eyes, a mouth stretched in a shape too wide to be real. But worst of all, it wore my mother's face. Or something that pretended to be it. My stomach twisted violently. Tears blurred my vision. "Don't look at it," Kaelren whispered sharply. "If you recognize it even for a second, it becomes harder to fight." I turned away quickly, heart pounding. But the image stayed with me, etched into my mind like a scar cut by moonlight. And outside, it laughed in a distorted echo of my mother's voice. The storm outside exploded in thunder that shook dust from the ceiling. Azaline grabbed a woven blanket marked with symbols and draped it over both Kaelren and me. The storm finally died near midnight, leaving a heavy silence that felt worse than the screaming wind. Azaline kept the lantern burning, the flame trembling as if it feared the dark too. Kaelren sat against the wall, sweat soaking through his shirt even in the cold air. His shadow stayed twisted, glued to the floor like tar. Every few seconds it jerked, pulling at him, trying to drag itself into a shape that didn't belong to him. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched, afraid he might disappear if I blinked too long. "It's quieter," I whispered. "Does that mean it left?" Kaelren shook his head slowly. "No, it's waiting. It always waits." His voice carried a deep ache, years of fear layered on top of exhaustion. "When it gets close enough to break the threshold, it stays near the edges of a home. It listens. It learns. It waits for a mistake." I tightened my grip on the charm. "It won't get in," I said softly. He looked at me with a tired half-smile. "It only needs one moment. One breath. One weakness." Outside, a faint thump echoed against the wall, soft, almost polite. Like a knock from something that didn't understand how to be human. Azaline spread old papers across the floor, filled with symbols drawn in dark ink. "These markings were passed down from those who survived encounters like this," she said. "The Skinwalker is old. Too old. Its hunger has lasted longer than we've had names." Kaelren shut his eyes tightly. "It's older than the town," he murmured. "Older than the desert itself." I stared at his shaking hands. "How did it choose you?" His jaw tightened. "It didn't. Chose my family. My mother tried to protect me, but she knew too much. She saw its real face once. That was enough." He swallowed hard, voice thinning. After she died, it wore her shape. It used her voice to get close to me. I almost let it in. My heart ached. You were just a child. He didn't answer. Azaline placed a stone bowl between us, filled with glowing embers. It wants you now, she said, looking at me, because your grief is still open. An open wound is an open door. My stomach twisted. But why pretend to be Kaelren's mother too? Azaline met my eyes. Because it remembers every life it ever tasted. Pain is its language, and it speaks it fluently. The house groaned again, louder this time. We all froze. Something brushed against the window slowly, scraping like a hand made of bone. It's closer, Kaelren whispered. Too close. Azaline moved to the window and pressed her palm to the glass. She whispered in a language I didn't know. The scratches stopped instantly. For a moment, silence returned. But then, from the other side of the house, a new voice called out. Kaelren, please help me. His eyes widened. He knew that voice. I saw the truth hit him like a blow. No, he breathed. Not him. Who is it? I asked. His throat tightened. My father. Azaline's face darkened with fear. Do not listen, she warned. But the voice outside kept calling, trembling, broken. Kaelren, my son. The pain in Kaelren's expression tore into me. Is he? I hesitated. Kaelren shook his head. He left when I was young. I never saw him again. The creature must have found him. Outside, the voice turned desperate. I'm cold, I'm hurt. Let me see you. Kaelren pressed his hands to his ears. It's lying, he whispered. I still wonder what happened to him. His shadow twitched violently, pulled toward the window like a magnet. Azaline grabbed Kaelren's arm, her grip strong for someone so small. Listen to me, she said firmly. It is trying to break your shape. If it takes your voice, it can take your place. Do not let it fracture your sense of self. Tears slipped down Kaelren's cheeks silently. How do I hold? Kaelren knelt on the floor, shaking as if every bone inside him was turning to dust. His shadow writhed like a creature trying to escape his skin. It stretched toward the broken door, toward the thing outside that called itself our grief. Azaline held his shoulders, whispering an ancient chant that cracked with urgency. But the creature's voice cut through her rhythm, mocking, bending, twisting into the sound of every person we had ever loved. Kaelren came home, it crooned. Then it spoke in my mother's voice again. Sweetheart, don't leave me alone. My throat tightened painfully. I pressed the charm harder into the fractured door, but the creature slammed against it again, snapping the bottom hinge. Wood splintered inward. A pale arm pushed through, long, thin, with joints bending backward. Kaelren screamed as if the sound pierced straight into his soul. His shadow tore itself free for a split second, becoming a second figure crawling out of him. No! Azaline shouted, grabbing a handful of glowing herbs and throwing them at the shadow. It hissed and shrank back, but Kaelren collapsed, gasping. I rushed to him, tears spilling. Stay with me, I whispered. Don't let it take you. His eyes flickered weakly. I'm trying, but it's winning. Azaline shoved a heavy wooden box into my hands. Open it, she ordered. Inside was a bundle of old cloth wrapped around a small obsidian dagger carved with runes. The blade pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. This is the only thing that can sever a Skinwalker's claim, she said. My hands trembled. I don't want to hurt Kaelren. You won't, she said. You'll cut the bond between him and the creature. But only if you aim for the shadow, not the body. My stomach twisted. The task felt impossible. The shadow on the floor wasn't one shape anymore. It rippled like black water, forming faces, limbs, memories. It whispered in Kaelren's voice, in Azaline's, in mine. You belong to me, it hissed. Kaelren curled forward, gripping his chest. It's inside my thoughts, he gasped. It's showing me everything I fear. I knelt beside him. Look at me, I whispered. Listen to my voice. Not its voice. Mine. His breathing steadied slightly, but his eyes still flickered with pain. The creature's real body pushed harder against the door. One more strike and it would get in. Azaline looked at me with fierce determination. You must cut the shadow now, before it fully replaces him. I lifted the dagger. Its weight felt far heavier than stone. As I stepped toward Kaelren's shadow, the air thickened, pressing against my skin like invisible hands trying to hold me back. The shadow rose up, taking on the twisted shape of a tall, crooked figure, its limbs stretched, its face hollow, its smile wide and broken. It looked almost like a man, but wrong in every way. "Sweetheart," it whispered, mimicking my mother again. My heart cracked, but I didn't step back. "You are not her," I said. My voice trembled but didn't break. The shadow hissed angrily. It lunged toward me, but the dagger glowed, pushing it away like flame. I moved closer to Kaelren. His real shadow clung weakly to his body like a dying creature. The false shadow tried to merge with it, twisting around it like chains. Kaelren's breath hitched. "I can't hold on," he whispered. "I can never become a dead man forever, but it wants to make me something worse." "You won't," I said firmly. "Not while I'm here." I raised the dagger, aimed at the darkest part of the shadow, the place where the creature's hunger pulsed strongest. And with all the strength I had left, I drove the blade down. The room exploded with sound. A scream tore through the air, high, inhuman, filled with fury and centuries of hunger. The shadow split apart like black smoke ripped open by light. Kaelren collapsed backward, gasping as color returned to his face. The creature outside shrieked, slamming into the door in a rage. Azaline grabbed my arm. "You weakened it, but you didn't kill it," she shouted over the noise. "We must banish it now, before it regains its form." She threw a